Assalamu alaikum, and hello everyone. I'm your host, Hannah Zuberi, and welcome back to another episode of Justice for All Now. You're watching us on Muslim Network TV, and you can watch us 24/7 on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. Today we're going to be talking about Breonna Taylor. She was an EMT, an aspiring nurse, only 26. Who was shot to death by police in her own home on March 13, 2020. In what's been described as a botched raid by officers who barged into Taylor's apartment in Louisville, Kentucky, as she lay sleeping and fired multiple shots. 3 months after she was senselessly killed, Taylor's name has been chanted all over the country at mass protests against the racist police brutality, which erupted after the death of Minnesota resident George Floyd, who we've discussed on this show many times. But also and this was done also at the hands of police. But with Taylor, number one, she's a woman, and a lot of times women's cases are often, they don't get the same sort of attention in the cases that men, in this who have been affected by police brutality do get. Taylor was shot 8 times by police. According to a lawsuit filed by her family, her killing was the result of a botched drug warrant execution. No drugs were found. The warrant in question targeted another person who lived miles away and had already been detained by the time police had entered Taylor's home. So around all of this, as we're entering, the last week of July, Breonna Taylor's name had sort of not been in mainstream media anymore. The cops that had been accused of this crime or had done this crime have not been caught. So this happened in March, and now we're in July. So in the past week, many of you may have heard about the Louisville87. So today we have 2 of Louisville87 here to talk about Breonna Taylor, justice for this case, organizing in Louisville, Kentucky, what it takes to build a movement there. So joining us today, I'm so excited to welcome Ambreen Paracha and Tia Edison. So Ambreen Paracha, better known as Reena, educates people about Islam, and she's brought many invigorating and thought-provoking speakers to Louisville as part of the annual Festival of Faiths. She's known for educating people about her faith. Lately, she's become very hands-on with her work, aiding multitudes of refugees who are coming to Louisville by helping them settle in her community. She's also an activist for Black Lives Matter. That's how I see her really active on her Facebook page, educating the South Asian community and the Muslim community about these causes. Tia Edison has been an activist for over 22 years. She organized the first police brutality rally in Louisville in 1998. She's on the executive board of Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. She's also a middle school teacher and the chair of the union's Black Caucus. Thank you so much, Tia and Reena, for being here. And just noticing that Tia, Justice for All is part of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. So it's really great to have you, a sister organization, be here with us. So thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
So welcome to both of you. And if you guys could share a little, we touched a little bit about it in the introduction, but I'd love to get to know you guys better. So if you could share a little bit more, each of you, a little bit about your background and how you got involved in activism, I'd really appreciate that.
Do you want to go first, Tia, or should I?
You can go first.
So for me, the major reason I got involved in this sort of work was primarily because I saw this incredible anti-Blackness within the South Asian community. And I felt that and I also deep down believe that, our liberation is very much tied to Black liberation. And so it essentially started actually in my own home, where I started talking to my own kids and my husband about, listen, we have to change the narrative. We have to stop, even certain things, right? Like when we talk amongst ourselves, certain words we use, they're so anti-Black, but because it's so much part of our conversations, and so it's so normalized, that it just never bothered anybody, to be honest, of speaking that way. And so it started off with that, and then again, I feel like I say that I showed up at a time when anti-Blackness needed to be addressed, and I started started looking in Louisville who I could work with, or how many people, like, without. And also, the one thing I want to make clear is I do not speak for Black people. I only hold space for them. And that I feel like that needs to be reiterated over and over and over again, because it's and I think I've talked to you, Hannah, about this also. I messaged you about it. Black women to the front, period. There's no if, there is no and there's no buts about it. And I feel like I have some privilege where I can make sure that within my community that happens. And so that's pretty much how I got involved.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you so much for connecting us with Tia. And we want to learn from you, and we want to know about your amazing journey since 1998, and what you've seen, the changes that you've seen in Louisville.
Thank you. So I guess, my journey did start in 1998, when I was in my fourth year at U of L. And one of my friends had went to Berkeley, and well, to begin with, that January of 1998, Adrian Reynolds was beat down by the police, and he ended up dying in jail. And so that was something that was kind of shocking. And that one of those real moments where we're like, what's going on in life? And I come from generations of trauma, just living in, and I haven't lived in poverty, but I have had, like, my first boyfriend was killed, my godson was killed. So I just live in this trauma. And so as a Black woman with children, like my first son, he was born in 1994. And when he was little, and then I seen this happen with Adrian Reynolds, I just had to get out here and start doing something. And so I ran across the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and it is located at 32nd and Broadway. And when I walked in, because it's located in the West End, which is a predominantly Black neighborhood, there was this just fragile old white lady, and her name was Ambreen. And soon later did I find out that, like, in the letter to Birmingham from Martin Luther King, that she was her name is in there. He talks about her. And then I learned so much about her and how white allies, or accomplices, now that we call them, how they operate. And it's been an amazing journey, just because I have always been inclusive in learning how to become a social activist. And I met Rena, how long ago was it? Probably about 4
years
ago. And we was working with Jobs with Justice, and I just fell in love with her. And she's always came and called and talked to me and asked me, like, what she can do. And she has been amazing, amazing sister in solidarity. And I really appreciate it.
Oh. And this is this beautiful friendship and allyship. And this is what we want to replicate throughout the country. And it is happening. The change is coming from within. I know from within the Muslim community, there is definitely, the tides have changed, and it is the work that has been done for the past 30, 40 years that finally is bringing to fruition right now. But in the past, let's talk a little bit about, and you brought that up, the civil rights movement but in the past months, the United States has experienced this revival of the civil rights movement, and is still experiencing the movement as many of its citizens pledge to become activists, and the many flaws of the law enforcement are revealed. So what do you both think are the biggest flaws in our law enforcement system today, especially when it comes to Louisville and in Kentucky? Because every city is different, every state is different, how things are managed in different states. So I really want to hear the Louisville story.
So much to unpack there, to be honest.
It really is. So to begin with, when there was a national movement around, police brutality, it was mainly focused on George Floyd and what the police officers had, or what we had captured, people had captured on camera. But from the beginning in Louisville, it really wasn't about George Floyd. It was about Breonna Taylor, of course. But then you also look at the system. Like we've always had police brutality. We've always had people killed here in Louisville. But we're at the point to where enough is enough. But I think at this point, we have learned so much throughout the other cases that we know that now it's systemic. I mean, some of us do, but it takes to get the large mass of people to understand what the problem is, and that it is systemic, and that how can we pinpoint that? So now we pinpoint that through no-knock warrants. We pinpoint that through just this. We have a lot of discrepancies on gentrification and what they will do in order to clear out a block. And so all of that, we knew that they should have never been to Breonna's house. And so we started looking back, okay, so what happened here? And so that's how we kind of started investigating the system. And we have always been out here. And I think that's one thing that's made Louisville different. I don't know if I answered the question, but I just wanted to make sure that was kind of clear on that part.
Well, I'll add to what Tia's saying. There's also a massive discrepancy as to how white people are charged and then how BIPOC people are charged. And we're seeing that, we always knew that was happening, but we didn't understand the full extent of it until we started to see these protesters being arrested. So if a white person was getting arrested, it was a misdemeanor, which is really nothing. But if a person of color, especially if a Black person or Indigenous person was getting arrested, it was always an inciting a riot or terroristic threats. So we kind of we're looking at these patterns right now more with a magnifying glass, glass than we were even before. The protest with Until Freedom. That's the biggest, where you see this felony charges, brought against for protesters. There was zero resistance, zero. Also, I think I'm going to go back a little bit, is that
and both of you were eyewitness to that. You were there.
We were arrested, yes. So we actually saw how it all went down. We also saw within the jail system, we saw how Black women were being tackled and how non-Black women were being tackled. So that was, those were things that you hear about stuff and you say, oh, yes, it happens, but it never affected my life. But the felony charge did affect my life, even though for 5 minutes it affected my life. But at the same time, I was also in that mind frame when I went into that protest that I was going to get arrested. I was not afraid of getting arrested because I felt there's this baton that was being passed to us by other civil rights leadership. And so either we were going to show up, or we were going to completely back off and say, I just feel like everybody has a place in the movement, but I'm also starting to get really, really tired of these, keyboard activists, where it's a trend to be an ally to a Black activist. Having said that, I will also go back a little bit. There was always a problem with the LMPD. Let me just be very honest. There was never not a problem. But in 2017, the Blue Lives Matter bill, which was, I think we were one of the first states where that was passed. And I actually testified against that bill in both the House committee and the Senate committee, because I knew what the impact of that bill was going to be. And 3 years later, we're actually seeing the actual impact of that bill on communities of color, especially Black communities. And I keep on saying Black communities because they really are the most affected by all these racist bills. That whole model minority, trope that is being sort of, that is sort of made for us, we have to swallow that trope in certain respects. So
Can you guys share, if you could share with us what the bill on the Blue Lives Matter bill was and how it's affected the Black community in Louisville?
So the bill was HB 14, and you can actually look it up. Basically, that was, and so one of my major issues with that bill is, and I'm sure Tia will agree with me on that, is that it says it's literally for the protection of first responders, which includes police, EMTs. So does that bill not apply to Breonna Taylor, who was killed by first responders? Right. So if this is
was a first responder
who we are going to protect, is that only for the men in blue, the bill, or is it a wider context? Because even when I was going in, the one thing that I could be 100%, I don't quote me on it. Actually, quote me on it, because what I was hearing even going in that this was that the vast majority of the first responders were not okay with that bill, that it was literally a bill that was being pushed by the men in blue. Also, I think one thing that people need to understand is that the bill, and Tia, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the bill was put forth by a Democrat. In the, that was, I think he's one of the authors of it. So that in itself was like jarring, so to speak. So I think that's again, I'm going to defer it to Tia, and please correct me, Tia, if I'm wrong in anything that I said.
Yes, Tia, we'd love to hear from you. So we know that these the problems with the Louisville Police Department have been going on for a long, long time. What are, and you've pointed out that you all know that these are structural problems. So what has been your biggest struggle in this fight for racial justice in your city?
No, I will just add that.
Can you hear us?
I can't hear you, Tia.
Yeah, I can't hear you either. Oops. So one of the things that you can do, Tia and Sadiq, perhaps we can just note the time on this so we can cut it out from the broadcast. If you exit the studio and come back in, then a lot of times the sound is fixed then. Okay. Yeah, that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
So Yeah, so I wanted to, so like until we'll wait for her to come back, but if you wanted to expand a little bit, you had been talking a little bit about the model minority myth and how have you seen that play out in actual protesting and being on the streets? Like, have you seen uh, that been broken in any way? Any changes in that scene?
Maybe a little bit, to be very honest. I don't feel like enough of us are coming out in solidarity. I really don't think that that's happening. Part of the reason I believe is
Can
that
you
we're not having that
hear me now?
conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I can hear you.
Hey, Tia's back. Can you hear us now?
I lost her again. I can't hear her.
Oops.
Yeah, I think I'm on a slack, like a delay.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can hear your voice.
Mhm.
And I think I'm on a delay.
Okay, but go ahead, Tia. You were
All
responding
right.
to
But I'm on a delay.
Mhm.
I think I'm on a delay.
It could
Okay, hold
possibly
on.
be the internet connection. That's
Mhm.
so. Let's if you can hear me.
Okay, so I hope what I was gonna say is I think that part of the problem is the Fraternal Order of Police, which is the police department's union. Let me.
Um, yeah, I hope we can have her back and her internet issues are fixed. It happens sometimes to our audience. We'll have that. We're trying to work on that. Um, so while we're waiting for her to come back, so she was talking about the Fraternal Order of Police, and yes, that's a problem in Maryland as well. And so what are the sort of things that you guys have been seeing from? Oh, there she is. I hope you can have her back.
So I think Tia can talk about the FOP a little bit more than I can talk about it because, again, the bill was pushed by the FOP massively. And they did actually bring some, what they do is, which is interesting, is they bring the younger, officers that they want to come and talk to the activists.
Mhm.
And so they sent, and he felt, he was a very respectable young man. He was, he was he claimed to understand where I was coming from, but I also understand how strong the pull of the blue uniform is. And I also understand
Can you
how
hear me?
much power that it yields. And I also understand that there is a blue white.
Okay. I'm just gonna do it on my phone. Is that better?
Okay, that's great. Yeah, we can see you, we can hear you. This is awesome.
Okay, so I'm on my phone now. But like I said, the FOP, they are the reason why the police have not been charged. They have a lot of things in there that needs to be looked at. But all right, let's go back to 1998. After I did this rally, we organized this thing called CAPA. At the time, it was called Citizens Against Police Abuse. And that is something like a citizens review board, to where there is not just your internal affairs that look at cases and police allegations in order. This would include more of the community that have a stake in this. And so I think that we did have that, and it passed in 1999. But then in 2000, they merged Louisville, the metro part of the city, and the Jefferson County. And when they merged the two, it created the Civilian Police Review Board to sunset. And since then, we have not been able to have one that is as strong as it was, because then it had subpoena power, and now it's just like kind of an advisory board.
Oh, okay.
And
Do they
that's what
even publish regular reports?
they just look over police issues like misconduct and allegations and everything. And it's just, like I said, like an advisory board, like, well, we would recommend that you do this, suspend this person, but then it falls back on the FOP contract. And basically the FOP contract says, like, you cannot fire a police just off of an allegation. Like, they would have to be all the way convicted and charged for that allegation. So all of the fine tuning of all of the policies and how they go together, and how the Blue Lives Matter, and then there was a gang bill at the same time. I'm a teacher, and I tried to advocate for even our teachers union to say no, and everybody is just was not on board. And they say they are now, and I hope they are, and I hope when we move forward and we're asking in the next legislative session that these bills be taken away and certain other bills be put in to protect Black and brown bodies. We'll see how they are.
So from what I understood from all this is that currently the reason why these 3 police officers have not been arrested is because the Citizens Review Board is not as strong as it used to be. And now, and the case has to go back to the Fraternal Order of Police. And this is the reason.
Well, no, the case doesn't go back to them, but there is a clause in there that kind of prevents them from being fired unless they have been convicted of whatever it is. So just simply coming out, like, even going through the whole entire trial, they cannot be fired until the decision is made at the end of the trial or case or whatever it is. But that is an agreement between the Metro Police Department and the Metro City Council.
And that's why it gives that immunity to the police officers. And this is something that if we wanted to even look at the national level, one of the biggest reforms that lawmakers and activists have been asking for is the end of qualified immunity for police officers, because this plays into that whole, once they do go into trial, then that comes into play as well. And then the Ending Qualified Immunity Act has been introduced in Congress, which the objective is to end qualified immunity, so they're not shielded from legal action when they do something wrong. What kind of precedent do you all think ending qualified immunity could have on future law enforcement reforms?
I think it definitely that, and pulling the pensions away from the police officers, because, so far, like, even if they are charged and arrested, we have these counties that don't see nothing wrong with killing Black and brown people, and they hire them, and then they still have their retirement from here, and then they get another, job in retirement. So pulling their pensions as well. And maybe even when that civil lawsuit comes in, they have to, it's not going to be on the city. It has to be on their pensions and their personal liability, like at their houses and their homes. And maybe they'll think twice before, because right now, even if they are charged, they still get to keep the house. Their kids get to be in a home or whatever it was. But if we can strip all of that, maybe they'll think twice before quickly pulling that trigger.
And is that a local or a state reform, or is that a could that be tackled on a national level? Okay.
I would push it for the local for sure, and I would push it for national. I know that I think they're pushing the Breonna's law. That's what we're called, and that's like no more no knocks, and that's supposed to be going to the U.S. Senate in the next session.
Yes.
By Rand Paul of all folks.
Yeah, and the person that actually made that even possible is another Black woman, queer Black woman, Keturah Herron. So, I mean, like I said, I keep on bringing back like this movement, the front line, we're there to amplify Black voices. So I think all eyes at this point are on Louisville for sure. There is no ifs and buts about it, because so much is coming out of Louisville at this point.
So let's talk about, we've talked about reforms. Let's talk about abolition. Let's talk about defunding police. So in Louisville context, what would defunding police look like? Where should that money go? What do you think your community needs instead of more policing?
Well, I will even say as a teacher, I have like I was on the executive board of all the teacher unions, and at this point, I'm relaying the message at like everybody's scared to go back to school. They don't know about COVID, and
Mhm.
my stance is I don't even want our kids to go into schools that have armed police officers in them,
Mm.
because we just had in January a vote to arm all police
Mm-hmm.
officers in every school in the state of Kentucky, and it had an emergency clause, which is a little bit disrespectful if you ask
Mm.
me. But so at this point, with all the trauma, with everything that we are seeing, with everybody saying that they are, supportive, and this is the point that I'm trying to make, for so long, people have been telling us what they think is best for us instead of asking us
Yes.
what is going on, what do we need. I've been sitting at so many tables, and people don't, they let me sit at the table, but they don't let me talk.
Mm-hmm.
They let me write down all the notes that I want to take, and I take it back to my constituents or whomever. But I'm not able to say, this is what trauma is. Generations of trauma, not
Mhm.
generations of wealth, but generations of poverty is violent. Generations of trauma that's never been healed. How can you help me if you
Mm.
have never been through? That's my that and so I'm not at the negotiating point with anyone right now.
Mm.
I really think that people should ask us what they want and try to help us get it.
Mhm.
And if I had to negotiate with someone about like why we are feeling this way, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rena, everyone is telling us how to protest.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot tell people how to protest.
Right.
Like
Mm.
a protest is, it, that's me. That's my feelings. Just like I try to tell all my students, you can't tell people how to feel. You can just listen to them. That's all. You can't tell them no. You can't feel like that. And
Exactly.
so at this point, I'm not negotiating anything. I think that and I watched something about school. So this is just a quick analogy I'm going to put on this. When it came to slavery, we had to abolish slavery, right?
Mm-hmm.
We did not say we needed to
Reform.
reimagine slavery.
Mhm.
We did not need to reform slavery. And the police were created to catch runaway slaves. And so the police department, the justice system, is the baby to slavery, if you
Mm.
ask me. And so if we had to abolish slavery, then we have to abolish the police department. Now,
Mm.
the wording is not the catchiest. It's not like the right to work that the Republicans came up with and they won with that, like right to work. Nice little campaign slogan.
Mm.
Fund the police and abolish the police, it's hard for people to grasp onto
Got
it.
you. Mm.
But when it comes to defunding, like the schools, all the police officers out, and yes, we need wraparound services, and not just for just mental health, but just the whole family needs to be included in these wraparound services,
Mm.
and that has to be an extension of school, and it has to be in the community that they live in, and so we shouldn't be busing, poor Black and brown kids all the way to the east end just to make their numbers look good
Mm.
when it comes to university. Um, so I hope I answered your question, but defunding the police officers would be the same as just making sure, like right now, what kind of proactive programs do they have in the city to
Mm.
prevent gun violence, crime, poverty, homelessness, all of these things. And if there is programs that already exist, then let's put the money into that. If there is not, then we need to create those programs.
So a lot of times we've heard, oh, let's put that money into social work. In your experience, has social workers in Louisville been a part of the problem or part of the solution?
Okay, you said I couldn't hardly hear real good. You said,
Yeah. So I was wondering, in part of the solution, as part of the solutions that people have offered is to take the money from the police department and involve social workers and start funding more social workers. In your opinion, especially in your community, have social workers been part of the solution or part of the problem?
I don't think it's really social work as per se, because we always put these programs into facilities that are like the Metro United Way, that is like, kind of like a corporation, nonprofit, ran by a lot of white folks, right? Like we need grassroots people that are in the streets. We had from United Freedom a group, GMACC. They were like ex-gangsters, ex-cons, they time, and they come out and they are violent disruptors. And so they walk the streets and they help de-escalate, because when we're talking about generations of trauma, we're talking about people that automatically escalate a situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we have occupied in Justice Park, we have learned that we need to teach people how to de-escalate. And so having people that look like them in positions that are already skilled in knowing how to de-escalate and helping them in this healing process is the only way that it's going to go. We cannot have social workers that don't look like them, that you have to sit in an office for 30, 40, half the day to try to get, certain services or whatever. Like, that's what I would not like to see. I would rather see more on the street helping, because at this park we've had so many homeless students come out here, and I've seen it on paper, but I never got to really see it in real life and see like what that looks like and how to really address that and let them know, like, I'm not your teacher, but I'm somebody that looks like you, and I know, you look like my son, and I can help you with this, and I'm gonna help you with these resources. And kids are more receptive to come to people that look like them and have been through the things that they've been through. Then we don't even have enough Black therapists here to deal with all of the trauma that some of our kids have. And I know they're not going to go talk to a white therapist.
Exactly. That's such an important point. When we're talking about what other after Breonna Taylor's death, what positive initiatives have you seen, both of you, coming out of Louisville, and what sort of change do you think can be brought forward from these initiatives?
I think that, and I'm going to have to give credit to the live streamers here, to be very honest. I think they changed the narrative big time. National media or mainstream media tends not to necessarily talk about what is happening, they're, within law enforcement structures. And so, it's interesting how you're seeing these young folk that are coming out, and they're literally in real time catching LMPD, behaving badly, to put it mildly. And so that because of them, I feel like a massive shift has happened within the Louisville community. You're seeing a lot more white people outraged by what is happening within the Muslim. I cannot talk about that much about the adult population, but the younger, the youth, the college kids, they are really speaking up, using their social media, raising awareness. I think a lot of them are still not showing up to a lot of the protests. Some are, but because I think they are a little bit, how our communities work. We're like, parents, determine what the child does. So, but, from, even from when, my arrest, for example, like I got so many messages from, younger kids within the community saying, gosh, like, we're so proud of you, you've been, it's not that they were not seeing what I was doing, but I feel like I was laughing, and with my husband last night, I said, I have street cred now. So,
Yeah, tell us what that was like to be a socialite turned into someone who was arrested for activism. This is a fascinating journey of yours, and so I know would love to hear until Tia comes back. We'll hopefully have her back, but would love to hear about that journey.
So I think that I've always been, sensitive to racial bias. But I think for me, the biggest push came towards social justice work, to be very honest, was 9/11. Because I truly understood in that instance that I was a second-class citizen, which is, so many Black folk already understand that. And then also there was this incredible fear at that time. So you couldn't speak up. And the reason we were sort of quiet was because white proximity. We enjoyed it, benefited from it, we thrived in it. And so even then, a vast majority of us were taking baby, we were just putting our a toes in it. We were not like really coming right out and saying like, what is happening. And even during that moment, Hina, I understood that if I don't align myself with other marginalized folk and understand their plight, I am not going to be able to talk about what the Muslim community is going through. Because I don't have a leg to stand off if I'm only speaking for myself and not for all the other marginalized folk. I feel activism is very intersectional. I'm not a theologian, so I'm not going to go into all the ramification of being a Muslim woman and being in spaces that, oh my gosh, I should or should not be in. I am an activist, so I will put myself in situations which are sometimes I get a lot of pushback, for. So I just, I think that 9/11 was instrumental. And then I think from that moment to then, 11 or 12 years later, we have the Muslim ban in effect. And during the Muslim ban is when I realized all these people were coming out, that are, again, marginalized folk were coming out and saying, we stand with you, we stand in front of you. And I realized how almost like inconsequential everything that I had done before that was, and how if I wasn't part of the larger conversation, then what was the point in me being here? And again, I think I became a little bit more religious. And when I became a little bit more religious and I started even delving into my own, Islamic history, I realized that's really the purpose of our existence is justice for all. It's not justice for just myself.
Exactly. Establishing
for my journey.
Establishing equity and fairness for everybody, not just ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is, and it's an awakening. It really is an awakening. It's like, it's like sort of being in the matrix and then finally realizing what that matrix. And once you start seeing it, then you start seeing it everywhere, and you can't stop you can't unsee it.
You can't.
And really, it is. And so when what did it take to organize Louisville87? I know there's a lot of work that is done behind the scenes. People like Tia have been doing it for decades. Please comment on that.
So the organization for Until Freedom was all done by Until Freedom themselves. The night before the event, the arrest, they did a little get together. Nicole Hayden, who is another Black activist in Louisville, she's the one that was actually instrumental in connecting local activists with the Until Freedom movement. And I mean, everybody knows, Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour, who's our hero. So I think we went in there, but we also had, we all know exactly what they are. We know that there's no man left behind as far as their organization is concerned. So it was very easy for us to sort of say, okay, they know what they're doing. They were incredibly organized. And then what we were told was that we are probably, there were chances of us getting arrested. But at the governor's mansion, when armed militia literally had gone in, I think 2 people from the whole group got a citation.
Wow.
AT. So I think that we anticipated an arrest. We were prepared for an arrest, but we didn't expect what was going to actually happen. Were we going to get a citation? Was it going to be a misdemeanor? I don't think any of us took into account that we were going to be, really getting a felony charge at that point. And we didn't even find out we were getting a felony charge until we were in the jail. That's when we were told that we were getting a felony charge.
What did you guys do to get that felony charge?
How do you mean?
What were you guys doing when they arrested you?
We literally went to Attorney General Cameron's front yard. We sat down, and that's really it. We sat in his yard and nothing else. There was no, the LMPD tried to tell us that the reason they tacked the felony charge to us was because they felt they were threatened by people in white T-shirts, which is incredible because they were the ones in riot gear. They were the ones that had the tasers. They were the ones with the batons. They were the ones with we had nothing with us. We were in white T-shirts which said Breonna Taylor in the back. That's it. That's the extent of what we had.
And what were your demands what was the demand that the sit-in was asking?
We're just saying arrest and indict the cops. That's it. What's taking so long? That's our only demand is that.
And the reason why I'm asking you this is because to the audience who may be listening in, we want to drill that in. That was the entire demand, that this young woman, this first responder herself, who was an EMT, was killed in her home, in her pajamas, in the safety of her bed, sleeping. And these protesters are out there since March. So it's been March, April, May, June, July. And this group of protesters went and sat in at the Attorney General's front yard, and they were arrested for a felony. Whereas the 3, please say their names. Who are these 3 cops? Because their anonymity also harms the movement. Why are they anonymous?
I will tell you their full name, so I will look it up. It's Brett Hankinson is the only one that's been fired. And from what we understand, by the way, is that he already has bought a house in Cincinnati. So we don't know whether he already has a job there. Is he we don't know. And as far as I know, until a few weeks ago, he was on a beach. So and I believe one of the people underneath they said that one of the women that was underneath, they said this is the most carefree we've ever been, and that was I felt like that was so unjust. I think that's the word to use. You are carefree, but you have an entire city that is screaming bloody murder. And also because it really is that it was a murder. It was no ifs and buts about it. And then you are on the beach having, fun, So yeah, the only one that's been fired is Brett Hankinson. I don't think the other, I'm trying to find all three. I want to tell them people their full names, not just like, and I'm going to have to, I don't know, I can't find it for some reason. Oh, that's interesting, right?
Yeah, that is interesting. Why aren't their names just as well known as the people who murdered? Like when we talk about any of these big major murder cases, we know them, right? So yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's Miles Cosgrove, it's Jonathan Mattingly, and Brett Hankinson. Of these three, only Brett Hankinson has been fired. And by the way, just so you know, he wasn't necessarily fired for the extrajudicial murder of Breonna Taylor. He was fired because he has multiple complaints of sexual assault against him.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so it wasn't because of Breonna Taylor that he was fired. So, and I think there's, somebody should even truly like nationally look into that why he was fired, because there are multiple, complaints against him, and those are public knowledge. I mean, pretty much everybody in Louisville knows about that.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I wish I had more time with. Okay, we had someone's watching and also pointed out the names. Thank you so much, Clara. I wish we could have Tia back on. I would love to continue this conversation. Please, the next time you all are having a next big movement, give us a call, talk about it here, use this platform to get to as many people as our the channel covers. Muslim Network TV is going out to Canada, US, and Mexico. So we'd love to, help you. This is a peace and justice show, and that's what we want. So thank you so much, Rina, for being here today, and give Tia my love, and we're going to have you guys back on.
Thank you, Hannah, for keeping Breonna Taylor's name in the media.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. As we enter the 10 days of Dhul-Hijjah, please do pray for Breonna Taylor's family. Keep her in your du'as. Talk about her in the community. Talk about so many victims of injustice, of police brutality in this country, of the whole policing system in this country. We need this. We need to be reminded of this. It hasn't gone away. Just because there might not be as many protesters on the streets doesn't mean that the system, the injustice in the system has ended. So thank you so much for joining us on Muslim Network TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Salam alaikum.